The city that vanished. Imagine a city hidden beneath one of the largest deserts on Earth. A city surrounded by endless sand. A city that once stood along one of the most valuable trade routes of the ancient world. A place where caravans carried a substance worth almost as much as gold. Then, the city disappeared. No armies came to conquer it. No modern city was built over it. And for centuries, people could not even agree on where it had been. Some called it Ubar. Others associated it with a mysterious place known as Iram of the Pillars. Legends described a wealthy city with enormous structures, powerful rulers, and a terrible fate. For centuries, Ubar seemed to belong to the world of legend until something extraordinary happened. Scientists began looking at the desert from space, and suddenly, the desert started revealing its secrets, the Atlantis of the Sands. The story of Ubar became known in modern times as the Atlantis of the Sands. Deep in the Arabian Peninsula lies the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, one of the largest continuous sand deserts on Earth. For generations, stories circulated about a mysterious settlement somewhere within this enormous wilderness, a wealthy place, connected to the ancient incense trade. But there was a problem. The desert is enormous. Finding a ruined settlement in a sea of sand is like trying to find a single house in an ocean. And the deeper explorers went into the desert, the more impossible the search became. Then archaeologists realized something important. They didn't necessarily need to search for the city itself. They could search for the roads that once led to it, the wealth of frankincense. To understand why Ubar mattered, we need to understand one strange substance, frankincense. For thousands of years, the aromatic resin produced by frankincense trees was extremely valuable. It was burned during religious ceremonies, used in perfumes, medicines, and rituals. And some of the most important sources of frankincense were found in southern Arabia. That meant something extraordinary was happening in the desert. Caravans were crossing enormous distances, carrying this precious resin toward distant markets. And where trade exists, wealth follows. Water became valuable, roads became valuable, oases became valuable, and settlements along these routes could become incredibly important. Perhaps this is where the story of Ubar begins, not with aliens, not with magic, but with trade, the city in the desert. According to the legend, Ubar was different from ordinary desert settlements. It was wealthy, powerful, and surrounded by enormous structures. Some traditions connected it with a place called Iram of the Pillars. The description became part of a much larger story, a civilization that possessed enormous wealth and eventually disappeared. But here's where history becomes difficult. We don't have a perfectly preserved city with a sign saying, "Welcome to Ubar." Instead, we have ancient texts, trade routes, archaeological sites, and a vast desert hiding countless pieces of the past. So archaeologists had to ask a different question. Where would a major desert trading center have been? And could the answer still be buried beneath the sand? The search begins. By the 20th century, explorers were actively searching for the legendary city. But the empty quarter was not an easy place to explore. Sand dunes can move, roads disappear, landmarks vanish, and ancient tracks can become completely covered. Then came something humanity had never had before, the ability to look at the Earth from space. In the 1980s and early 1990s, researchers began combining archaeology with satellite imagery. Instead of searching randomly, they searched for patterns, ancient caravan routes, oases, geographic features, and traces of human activity hidden beneath the desert. And eventually, the satellite images revealed something extraordinary. Ancient routes appear to converge at a location in southern Oman, a place called Shizr, the Discovery. In 1992, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory reported that spaceborne radar and satellite imagery had played a key role in locating what was described at the time as a lost city of Ubar. The technology was extraordinary. Radar could help reveal features beneath dry desert surfaces. Researchers traced ancient caravan routes, and discovered that several routes appeared to converge near Shizr. Then archaeologists began excavating, and they found a settlement, a fortified structure, a well, evidence of long-distance trade, and archaeological material connected to different periods and regions. Suddenly, the legendary lost city didn't seem quite so impossible. But there was a problem. Finding an ancient settlement was not the same as proving that it was Ubar. The strange collapse, the ruins at Shizr, contain another fascinating clue. The settlement was associated with an oasis, and with a well that would have been essential for life in the desert. But beneath the settlement, the geology was unstable. Part of the structure collapsed into a depression, and this created a dramatic possibility. Could the collapse have contributed to the abandonment of the settlement? Could a place that depended on water have slowly lost the very resource that made its existence possible? Over time, trade routes changed. Sea transportation became increasingly important. The incense trade changed, and desert settlements that once depended on caravan traffic became less important. The city did not necessarily vanish overnight. It may have disappeared slowly as the world around it changed. The darker story. But the archaeological explanation is only one side of the story, because the legend of Ubar is much darker. According to traditional accounts associated with Iram, its people became powerful, wealthy, and arrogant, and eventually they were destroyed. Some versions describe a catastrophic punishment, a force powerful enough to erase the city and leave almost nothing behind. The story survived while the city disappeared. For centuries, that was all anyone had, a legend, a name, a place nobody could locate, until satellites began looking for it. And this is where the story becomes almost unbelievable, because the technology used to search for a legendary city was developed in the modern world, while the clues themselves were thousands of years old. Was Shizr really Ubar? Now comes the question, was Shizr actually Ubar? This is where we have to be careful. The connection is fascinating. The location fits the ancient incense trade. Ancient routes converge in a region. Archaeological remains were discovered, and satellite imagery helped reveal a network of old routes across the desert. But archaeologists have not reached universal agreement that Shizr was the legendary city described in the stories. In fact, some researchers argue that Ubar may have referred to a region or people rather than one specific city. That changes everything, because perhaps there was never one enormous city waiting beneath the sand. Perhaps Ubar was the name of a wider landscape, a territory, or a trading world that later became transformed into the legend of a single lost city, the real mystery. And now, we reach the most interesting part. We may have found the place behind the legend, but we may not have found the legendary city itself. The archaeological site at Shizr is real. The ancient trade routes are real. The frankincense trade is real. The desert settlements are real. And the technology used to trace their routes from space is real. But the identity of Ubar remains uncertain. And perhaps that's what makes the story so fascinating. Because the question is no longer simply, where's the lost city? It becomes something much bigger. How many ancient settlements are still hidden beneath the world's deserts? How many roads have disappeared beneath the sand? How many civilizations have vanished without leaving enough evidence for us to remember their names? What if there are more? The story of Ubar teaches us something important. The ancient world was not empty. Deserts that look lifeless today were once crossed by people, caravans, merchants, explorers, and entire communities. Some settlements survived, others were abandoned, and some may have disappeared so completely that we don't even know their names anymore. The desert doesn't simply destroy history. Sometimes it preserves it under meters of sand. Ancient roads can survive, walls can survive, objects can survive, and with the right technology, we may eventually see them again, which raises an unsettling question. How many lost cities are still waiting to be discovered? Ubar may have been a city. It may have been a region. It may have been a real place that later became surrounded by legend. Or perhaps the true location of the legendary Ubar is still somewhere beneath the sands. We don't know, and that's the difference between a mystery and a fact. The ruins at Shizr are real. The ancient trade network is real. The archaeological evidence is real, but the complete story of Ubar is still unfinished, and maybe somewhere beneath the enormous deserts of Arabia. Another piece of that story is still waiting, not for treasure, not for aliens, but for someone to simply look in the right place. Because sometimes a lost city isn't destroyed, it's just forgotten. This was only one of the lost civilizations hidden in the shadows of history. There are ancient cities beneath deserts, beneath forests, beneath oceans, and sometimes beneath the cities where we live today. The more we discover, the more we realize how much has been forgotten, and our journey is only beginning. The crystal mind. We begin with the story. Then we discover what is really behind it.